Hey everyone, I am Dr. Derek Matthews, co-founder of Character Quest. I'm so excited that you're here because today we're launching our YouTube channel, which is very exciting. Also a little nerve-wracking, but we are launching this series called Leaders Are Readers because it's no secret that some of the most successful leaders in the world are habitual readers. And if you're not reading, you're not growing, in my opinion. I think reading is super important. Now, when I'm talking reading, I'm talking you're reading books, maybe an actual book or a Kindle, or you're listening to audiobooks, that's how I crush books, is with Audible, because I can't sit and read a book. I have to run and listen to an audiobook. That just is what works for me. But anyways, a lot of people come to me and ask me what books I'm reading. And I love this because it gives me an opportunity to pour into someone and help them solve a specific pain point, whether it's at work, in their personal life, or if they just want a fun book to read. But for the purpose of this channel, we're going to talk about leadership-related business books. And I'm going to select some that have impacted me the most, overview them, not review them. I'm going to overview them and kind of pull out some key nuggets that I've taken from them and been able to apply in my business. So without further ado, today we're going to kick things off with a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, also known as 40X, as you can see, 40X. That's simple. That's a lot easier to remember. And this book is obviously about 4 disciplines of execution. So what does execution really look like? That's what this book gets down to. How do you create disciplines in your role as a leader and with your team to create an execution machine? Because a brilliant idea without execution is pretty much worthless. You can have the greatest strategy in the world, but if your team doesn't act on it, and if you're not following up with your team, it's just going to disappear. And so this book really gets into the idea that we're naturally not very good at execution. I know I have to work on it a lot because execution requires change, and leading change is really hard because you're asking people to change the way that they do things, to create these disciplines, to execute a strategy in a particular way. That's tough because what gets in the way? The whirlwind, the things that blow up in our face, that steer us off course. And what we need to do is create a disciplined approach to combat those whirlwinds. And that's what this book is about. So let's jump into the 4 disciplines. Discipline number 1 is focus on the wildly important. Now, what research shows, and especially this book points at, is the more goals you'll have, the less you'll be able to focus on. I know it feels awesome to sit down with your team and have all these goals written out. It makes you look ambitious, but ambition is not the greatest thing when you're trying to be laser focused, because you should be focused about less, because less is more. And so what this book talks about is, I think it's like if you have anything more than 3 to 5 goals, that your ability to execute on them and achieve them drops dramatically. So learning to say no to things is better than saying yes to everything. And that's what this book really tries to get you to become more disciplined on shrinking those goals. Pick 3 things, pick 2 things, pick 1 thing that you're going to get really good at. Do you want to go wide with a bunch of different goals, or do you want to go deep with 1 goal and really focus on that goal and get really good at it? So that's where this book talks about WIGs, wildly important goals. They have to be specific and have a huge impact on your team. So you can't have a huge impact if you have 10 different goals for your team. You just can't. You should sit down with your team and cross out the things that don't have the largest impact. What is measurable? What can have the biggest impact? Focus on 1 goal instead of a dozen goals. So leaders are wired to do more, and that is a problem that we have to have some awareness about. We're wired to get more done, but we need to focus on less. So I'll give you an example. So let's say you wanted to reduce your body weight from 200 pounds to 185 pounds by November 1st. That's a wildly important goal because it's specific, it's measurable. So you want to go from 200 pounds to 185 pounds by November 1st. And I'm just making up some numbers and dates, but that's specific, it's measurable, it has an end date, and that's one goal. And you can go really deep with that goal and be laser focused on it. So let's jump to discipline number 2, act on the lead measures. This was really interesting to me because the way that the psychology works of, you break it down, execution or tracking a goal, is there's 2 different aspects of a goal. There's the lag measure and the lead measure. Most of us salespeople focus on the lag measure, the quota, the number we have to hit. We forget about the lead measure. The lag measure tracks the WIG, like revenue, profit, weight loss. So I want to lose 20 pounds. That 20-pound goal is the lag measure. But the lead measure, the thing that we most forget, is that it tracks the things that have the highest impact on us that we must do to achieve a goal. So let me go back to the weight loss example because I think it just makes so much sense, because I think all of us probably at one time or another have wanted to lose weight. So if I want to lose 20 pounds by November 1st, which is actually a long time from now since it's January, what are the things, the disciplines, the things that I can do, because that's the lag measure, what are the things that I can control that will lead me to that goal? What are the things I can do to lead me to that goal? Well, I'm now specific and measurable. I can work out 5 days a week for 1 hour, okay? So those are lead measures that will lead me to that goal. I can restrict my caloric intake to, I don't know, I'm not a nutritionist, let's say 2,000 calories. I have no idea what I'm talking about. But 2,000 calories every day, and so on and so forth. So right there, I just created lead measures that are going to lead me to that lag measure. Instead of focusing on the weight loss, I'm focusing on specific, controllable things that I can make myself disciplined on with a daily basis and stick on a clear path to achieving my goal. Diet and exercise, those are lead measures. Okay, now let's move on, because you're probably wondering how this ties to business. If you are a sales manager and your goal is to, I'm in the beer industry as well, so let's say I want to gain 10 draft lines of Blue Moon, all right? One of the greatest craft beers in the world. I want to create lead measures for my team so that they achieve the 10 draft lines, because we all love draft beer, right? I know I do. The lead measures are how many times a week are you going to make a sales call? How many accounts are you going to hit? What tool, how many times a week are you going to expose our customer to a tool that's going to help them make a decision to put some different beer on draft? So it's those things, account visits, sales calls, things of that sort. Those are the lead measures that will lead you to that actual goal of the lag measure of getting the 10 draft lines. So let's move on to discipline number 3. Keep a compelling scoreboard. So it's no doubt that people play differently when they are keeping score. If you see kids on a playground just shooting a basketball and you start keeping score or start counting for them, they play differently. I think that's just human nature. It boosts engagement when we know what the score is. When your team doesn't know the score of the plan that you're executing on, when they don't have it visibly accessible, it does something within the human spirit where we're just not as focused, we're not as engaged. And so what this book really gets at is, focus on creating a scoreboard that's designed by the players of your team. Sitting your team down and saying, okay, how can we create a scoreboard so we can visually track that lag measure, that thing that we're trying to achieve? How can we also track the lead measures, that those specific measurable things that we can control, that those habitual things that we're going to do, in order to achieve that lag measure. So how are we going to measure, how are we going to track those? I think a really good example of this is, just like a simple thermometer when you're trying to raise money. That's a visual scoreboard. It doesn't necessarily track the lead measures, but it kind of gives you the idea. So keeping a compelling scoreboard is super important. And the last discipline that I want to talk about, the fourth discipline of execution, is creating a cadence of accountability. So far, we've, let me review these. We focused on the wildly important. We've acted on the lead measures, the specific measurable things that we can do habitually that will lead us to that lag measure. We've talked about creating a compelling scoreboard. Now we're talking about accountability, which is the part that is the most challenging. But they make it pretty simple in this book because these are regular and frequent team meetings that focus on the wildly important goal. So we talked about weight loss. We talked about getting, if you're in the beer industry, getting draft lines is very important. And this is a weekly meeting, 20 minutes, where we hold each other accountable and talk about what are the disciplines, that habitual behaviors that we are doing on a consistent basis that are going to lead us to that goal. How many sales calls are we making? How much time are we spending with our key accounts? What sales tools how many times a week are you exposing the customer to a sales tool that's going to help them make a fact-based decision? This is where we talk about commitments. And you talk to your team about the things you've done in the past week, and you make commitments on the things you're going to do for the next week. And then it keeps going and going and going. The thing about these meetings, and this book is very clear about this, no whirlwinds allowed. There can't be but this happened, or this came up, or this there was a fire here that I had to put out. None of that. And that's where a lot of meetings get steered off course, because we go to sit down and talk about how we're acting on the strategy, executing the strategy, and then a whirlwind pops up and we get distracted and focus on that. That's where we're creating disciplines of execution. That's where this book says we're not talking about any of that stuff. We're talking about the commitments we made last week and the commitments we're going to make for next week on the lead measures that are going to lead us to completing that lag measure. So here's some of the questions that they talk about. Did I meet last week's commitments? Did I move the scoreboard? And what will I commit to next week? So accountability, it's huge. So 4 Disciplines of Execution is a great book. I highly recommend it. One of the things I know as a leader is it's very difficult to get your team engaged to execute on a strategy. And I think for anyone who might be a young leader or even a seasoned leader, it's always great to have a model to work off of to try with your team. And so I highly recommend this book. I know it's revolutionized the way that I look at execution in my personal life and with my professional life. I'll give you a perfect example. I had lots of goals for this year, lots of personal goals. And I was really ambitious. And I said, you know what? What would 4 Disciplines of Execution tell me? Narrow it down to 1. So I've narrowed all my goals down, which were pretty large, and I'm just focusing on one thing, and that one thing for my personal life is to run a marathon. And so I'm tracking every day how many miles I'm running, how much I'm stretching, and my nutrition and things of that sort, diet and exercise that are going to lead me to that lag measure of completing a marathon. It seems like a pipe dream right now, but I believe these disciplines can really help you. For professionals, get this book, go through it with your team, and at least start a dialogue with your team, because, man, people struggle with execution, and even being able to have a vernacular centered around execution with your team is huge. So that's my thoughts on this, and if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can leave a comment below, and I look forward to our next book, which will be revealed soon. So thank you for your time.